We're going to talk about, a little bit later, sort of the anatomy of a cancellation, using what's been going on with Joe Rogan as an example. Before we go there, though, why don't you tell me, what is it that we're seeing? How is this different? I find that, at least in your threads, you've been very, very good at explaining this in a simple way, and somehow often it eludes simplicity in how it's described.
Yeah, there is this kind of quasi-academic jargon that they use to make their worldview look a lot more scientific than it actually is, to make it look a lot more objective than it is. They play a sort of linguistic sleight of hand when they're hiding the concepts. They tend to redefine terms and play around in the language. So why don't we go about it like this? I will explain what post-modernity is. Then I will take a couple of concepts from some French philosophers and explain what those are, and then I'll give a brief introduction to how those things kind of have worked like yeast through the bread of culture, so to speak. So Marnie Gauthier wrote a wonderful book, Amnesia and Redress in Contemporary American Fiction, and describes postmodernism in the following way. Let me see if I can just pull it up here. She writes this: as Jean Baudrillard and others note, postmodernity is said to be a culture of fragmentary sensations, eclectic nostalgia, disposable simulacra, promiscuous superficiality, in which the traditionally valued qualities of depth, coherence, meaning, originality, and authenticity are evacuated or dissolved amid the random swirl of empty signals. So let me break down what that means a little bit. The idea is when she says fragmentary sensations, eclectic nostalgia, disposable simulacra, what she's talking about is inauthentic copies, forgeries, and insincere sort of statements and ideas that are floating around the world. You could think of people on the news who tell lies. You could think of people who create inauthentic and fake academic papers in order to boost their credibility. People who are doing poor academic work that's laundered to look like good academic work. You could think of it as though someone creates a facade. It looks like the wall has been repaired, but once you look underneath the drywall, all the cracks in the foundation are still there. So, and then she says, the traditionally valid qualities of depth, coherence, meaning, originality, and authenticity are evacuated or dissolved amid the random swirl of empty signals. And so that's speaking to the idea that we have a whole, instead of writing, for example, deep, meaningful love songs and poems, those are replaced with shallow, insincere, fake sort of pop songs and poetry, which don't have any real depth, but are just at the most superficial level. And the analogy there is that the real work that was done in the West to lay the foundations for what we've had so far, to lay the foundations for the Enlightenment, to lay the foundations for science, to lay the foundations of the church, to lay the foundations of truth and goodness and beauty, all those have been replaced by inauthentic copies of the real thing. The equivalent of swapping out wine for Kool-Aid. That's the idea. So it's rather than having deep, meaningful conversations with real, nourishing content, we're left with the conversational and intellectual equivalent of empty calories. It's the cotton candy version of the real thing.
Well, as you were reading this description originally, in my mind, I was imagining the metaverse, actually. But it's interesting.
Yeah. So she's pulling this from a French philosopher named Jean Baudrillard, who was writing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Baudrillard is a fascinating figure. He is a sociologist by training, but he's deeply, deeply cynical of what's going on. Here's the example I use. I want you to imagine for a second a strawberry. Suppose that you are walking through, we'll say, a field, and you come across wild strawberries. You pick one up, it's red, it's kind of funny shaped, and you eat it, and it's delicious and it's wonderful. That wild strawberry is real. It's nourishing, it's part of the natural environment. That strawberry is real. So some time goes by, and people see that these wild strawberries grow, and someone says, hey, why don't we just take the seeds, plant all the seeds out, we'll grow them, and then we'll have strawberries all the time. Some time goes by and somebody goes, you know what we can do? We can just take the seeds from only the best strawberries and we'll just plant those seeds so that the only strawberries that get grown are the biggest, reddest, juiciest strawberries. Well, someone else comes along and says, you know what we can do? We can mash these strawberries up and we can turn them into pie. Oh, okay, that's a pretty good idea. Then someone says, you know what we can do? We can actually take the stuff that we made the pie out of and we can mash it up and we can make a little strawberry candy. And that's pretty good. We can make a candy. Well, then someone someone else comes along and they look at the candy and they say, well, what we can do is we can actually just extract the strawberry flavoring from the candy and we can make a Jolly Rancher or some strawberry gum. And that's pretty good. And then someone else says, you know, what we can do is we can actually just, rather than using the real strawberry extract, we can make a synthetic strawberry extract. We can make it using high fructose corn syrup and some cane sugar and some other flavorings. And we don't even need the real strawberries. We can just make a synthetic strawberry flavoring, and we can make candies out of that. And then someone takes the synthetically flavored strawberry candies and says, you know what? We can take that flavoring and we can make a strawberry soda. And then someone else comes along and says, you know what? We can make a Slurpee that tastes like the strawberry soda. And so we start out with a wild strawberry and we end up with the Slurpee. Now you can imagine I have a son. I'm walking with my son and I give him a strawberry Slurpee and we're walking with the strawberry Slurpee and he's drinking the strawberry Slurpee. And while we're walking, we come across a patch of wild strawberries. And he looks at the wild strawberries, picks one up and he eats it. And he says, you know, Dad, this kind of tastes like my drink. But I like the drink better. It's much tastier, Dad. We don't need these. These aren't real strawberries. This is a real strawberry. And that's what Baudrillard thinks has happened. And you could think about this. An easy way to think about this is look at social media. Take Instagram, for example. You know, 100 years ago, when they first invented the picture, you just had a picture of somebody. It was black and white. And then there was a picture of people in color, and that's what they looked like. And then somebody invented makeup. And then somebody else came along and invented fancy lighting. And then somebody came along and invented fancy cameras. And then somebody came along and invented Photoshop. And then someone came along and invented airbrushing. Then someone came along and invented plastic surgery. We're at the point now where we can see people on Instagram that nobody looks like. Even the person who it's a picture of doesn't even look like that because they're covered with so many layers of makeup and with filters and with everything else that the image isn't real. So he thinks that this is what's happened with everything, that we're left now in a world of appearances where we no longer have real newsmen anymore. He said at one time we had people who would read the news and give you just the facts. Now you have a bunch of people who will give you they will selectively edit the facts to tell their own opinion, and then they'll layer it thickly with their own editorializing to the point where when it's done, you have no idea what the actual facts are. We used to get the facts. We don't get the facts anymore. We just get various opinions. And so you have one guy on one channel and he's just giving his opinion. You have another guy on his channel and he's just giving his opinion, and who knows what's true, because the art of real journalism, of authentic journalism, of truth-telling and fact collection is gone, and it's been replaced by people who have put on TV something that looks like journalism but is in fact just editorializing. And he thinks that we've done this with pretty much everything. He thinks that all of the authentic, real ways in which humans have gotten along with each other have been processed and faked to create the kind of strawberry Slurpee version of the real thing. You can use food for an example. How much real food is in a fruit roll-up? And he thinks that we haven't just done that with, like fruit roll-ups and Diet Pop. He thinks we've done that with reality itself, with our truth-making institutions. We no longer have real professors who teach real truth about real morality and about real good art to students so that the students can learn what is really true and good and beautiful. He thinks we have professors who are standing up and doing something that looks like that, but really it's something else. We have an artificial fake copy of the real thing. That's what he believes.